While millions of people are screaming at their TVs, painting their faces, and letting their mood collapse because a group of strangers lost a game, there's a massive group of people who simply don't care about sports at all. And according to neuroscience, their brains may actually be wired differently. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear might completely change how you see the sports-obsessed people in your life. Here's something nobody really talks about. Not caring about sports doesn't make you boring. It doesn't mean you lack passion. And it definitely doesn't mean something is wrong with you. But something interesting is happening inside your brain. And it's very different from the roughly 60% of Americans who follow sports almost religiously. So let's start with the obvious question. Why do so many people care so much about sports? Humans are tribal creatures. For thousands of years, belonging to a group meant survival. Your tribe protected you, fed you, and kept you alive. Modern sports are basically ancient tribes, with better logos and merchandise. When someone watches their team play, their brain releases oxytocin. Oxytocin is the bonding hormone. It's the same chemical that helps you feel close to family and loved ones. Sounds wild, but it's true. The brain literally tricks people into feeling like millionaire athletes are part of their clan. But here's where it gets interesting. People who don't obsess over sports often have lower tribal instincts. Their identity isn't tightly attached to group membership. They're more individualistic. They don't need to belong to something bigger to feel complete. Research backs this up. Studies show that people with low interest in sports display much less us versus them thinking. In other words, they don't automatically dislike the opposing team just because it's not theirs. Now let's talk about what happens inside the brain of a hardcore sports fan. You know that feeling right before opening a gift? That anticipation is dopamine firing. Sports fans get that same dopamine hit during games, constantly. Every play, every possession, every moment of uncertainty. That's not an accident. It's intermittent reinforcement, the most addictive reward pattern known in psychology. It's the same principle behind slot machines. Brain scans show that watching sports activates the same reward centers as gambling. The uncertainty is what keeps the dopamine flowing. Your brain doesn't really care where dopamine comes from. It just wants more. People who don't care about sports don't get that dopamine surge from vicarious competition. And part of that may actually be genetic. Research suggests variations in dopamine receptor genes influence how much people care about spectator competition. So your indifference to whether a team wins or loses might literally be in your DNA. There's another psychological layer too. Sports fans often experience something called basking in reflected glory. When their team wins, they say, "We won." When the team loses, they say, "They lost." Notice the shift. People who don't obsess over sports are less likely to do this. Their self-concept stays consistent. Their self-esteem doesn't rise and fall based on outcomes they can't control. Now, this isn't about one group being better than the other. It's about difference. Interestingly, sports fans often score higher on certain empathy measures. They practice caring deeply about others' struggles, even strangers wearing a jersey. So why don't non-sports people feel that same pull? It comes down to empathy allocation. Everyone has a limited capacity for emotional investment. People who don't care about sports often direct that empathy elsewhere. Toward relationships. Toward creative work. Toward ideas, art, music, or causes they can directly influence. Studies show they often score higher in openness to experience and appreciation of beauty. They're still seeking meaning, connection, and emotional reward. They're just finding it in different places. And sometimes, not caring about sports has a personal backstory. Maybe they were excluded in gym class. Maybe sports culture felt aggressive or alienating. Maybe they never understood why grown adults scream at televisions over a ball. Or maybe they just find it boring. All of those are valid. The real divide between sports fans and non-fans comes down to how meaning is experienced. Sports fans often find meaning in narrative. The comeback story. The underdog. The rivalry. The dynasty. It feels like real drama with real stakes. People who don't care about sports often see that randomness as meaningless. They think, why invest emotionally in something I can't control, involving people I don't know, that doesn't affect my actual life? They're not wrong. And neither are sports fans. It's just two different approaches to the human need for story and purpose. One group finds meaning in championships. The other finds it in books, relationships, creativity, or personal growth. Psychologists call this parasocial investment versus direct engagement. Sports fans build one-sided emotional relationships. Non-sports people prefer investing where their presence actually matters, where their care influences the outcome. Neither approach is superior. They're simply different strategies for navigating life. Flow states, those moments of total absorption, can come from many activities. For some people, that's watching sports. For others, it's almost anything else. Here's something especially interesting. People who don't obsess over sports often report feeling more present in their own lives. They're not spending hours every week emotionally invested in someone else's struggle. They're engaged in their own. There's something quietly radical about that. So what does all of this mean? If you don't care about sports, you're not missing a fundamental human experience. You're just different. Your reward system, your tribal instincts, your empathy allocation, they're calibrated differently. And that's perfectly okay. So the next time someone asks, "Did you see the game?" and you genuinely don't care, remember this. You're not broken. You're not boring. You're just playing a different game. And that game might actually have higher stakes.